Fortunately, my imagination has served me well, because it sure wasn't my athletic abilities. I became painfully aware of this downfall in the second grade when I discovered I only ran like the wind when I ran alone. And that was also when I realized that to forward dribble a basketball, the basketball needed to go with you. I'd step off and the ball would just bounce up and down behind me, and somebody from the opposing team would grab it, run down the court with spectacular dribbling skills, shoot the basket, and I'd be out of the game. If I accidentally did get in the path of a loose ball and took a shot, I suffered the embarrassment of not even reaching the bottom of the net. Now, I would have loved to have heard the swish of a ball through the net. I hoped I would, but it never happened. Back on the bench again. Being the smallest kid in the second grade is not a happy thing. Now, my teacher, Mrs. Barnhart, always had some kind of exercise activity for us at recess. She'd take all 30 of us in single file to the outer edge of the asphalt playground, and for the third time this month, we were going to race all the way across an open field to the biggest, oldest, tallest tree any of us had ever seen. Well, when you finally got there, you had to touch it and run all the way back to the chalk line she drew at the finish. Now, this gave her just enough time to choke down a cigarette. Well, she blew her whistle and we were off. Marshall Robinson and Eddie Johnson were the two fastest boys in the class, and from the start, they were way ahead as usual. And in third place was Linda Ash, who was already almost 5 foot 10 inches tall and destined to be a track star and b-ball phenom. Now, everybody remembers who came in first, and they remember who came in last. Now, nobody cares about number 4 through, say, 25. They are invisible in the mass, living in anonymity. I consistently came in number 27. Now, I could always beat Emma Clough. She had a club foot. And whooping my best friend David Stein, little redhead Jewish boy, was easy. His legs were shorter than mine, and he had a problem keeping his glasses on his face, because when he ran, he shook his head from side to side, believing it somehow helped his momentum. Now, I could always count on him losing them and then having to stop, pick him up, and try to catch up again. Now, that Penny Thompson, she was a dark horse. If she was wearing dirty shoes, she might have beat me, but that never happened on account of the fact that she was the ugliest girl that ever lived in northern Indiana, and her mama knew it. Ugly on his own isn't slow, but her mother made sure she went to the beauty parlor every week to have her hair done, and she came to school every day dressed to the nines. She owned patent leather shoes in every imaginable color, all to my advantage. You see, she loved her clean, shiny shoes, and running across that dirty field was a horrifying ordeal to Penny. She ran like she was dodging dog crap the entire way. But the guy a few yards ahead of me, kid number 26, if just once I could pass him, I could disappear into that number 4 through 25 massive anonymity where I could bask in average. It never happened. I was always remembered as the guy who beat the girl with the club foot and still did no better than 27th place. Miss Barnhart also had a thing for dodgeball, and I dreaded lining up to play. Somehow or another, one day I was chosen to throw the first ball. I don't care how hard I threw that soft red rubber ball, it just glided through the open airspace like a slow-motion movie clip. Now, I thought for a second I might have a chance at knocking Diana Fleming out, but she just smiled as it floated toward her and palmed it with one big paw. Poof. The game just started, and I was already on my way to the sidelines, humiliated by a girl. And there I sat by myself, wondering if I would ever find that one thing that I could do better than anyone else. That one thing that would put me in the Pearly Elementary Book of Legends forever. That one claim to fame that was so magnificent kids would be in awe of me for all time, for generations to come even. I sat there alone, pondering the possibilities, looked out across that open field, and I saw Jimmy Holbert drop from the bottom branch of that grand old tree. Well, Jimmy was in the 4th grade and was known to be an arrogant jerk that had to outdo everybody and everything. I had to snicker to myself thinking about the time when my big sister and Diane Tobolsky were jumping rope on the sidewalk with a couple of other girls, and Jimmy kept riding his bike back and forth, just trying to agitate them, so they'd have to stop to let him go by. Well, they got tired of it and decided it was time to end all that. The rope laid seemingly harmless on the sidewalk, and when he got just close enough, they jerked that rope up tight and clotheslined him across the throat. He went home. His sister Sharon was in my class, and the next morning on the way to school, I asked her what Jimmy was doing up in that tree. Well, he carved his name above the highest initials up there. He says nobody could beat that. He said the limbs were so small up there that if he went any higher, they would have broken. Well, later that day when I saw him on the playground, I looked him up and down and figured he outweighed me by at least 25 pounds. And now that got me to thinking, my being that much smaller than Jimmy, what if I could climb higher, much higher, so he couldn't come back and find a way to top me? If I could carve my initials at the very top of that big old tree, it would be proof. There'd be documentation that I was there, and there would be no denying my greatest feat. I would have earned my place in the Pearly Elementary Book of Legends. Well, I could hardly sleep that night. I was imagining all the noisy congratulations, the admiring looks I'd get from all the right girls, and maybe even a little respect from Jimmy Hobart. I awoke the next morning with my game face already on. I took my pocket knife out of a cigar box under the bed and shoved it down into my front pocket. I stood and glared at myself in the mirror, went down the stairs and ate my cornflakes without a good morning or nothing to nobody. My focus was fine-tuned to the climb ahead of me and nothing was gonna break it. I marched on down that sidewalk with purpose, a man on a mission. My stride quickened as I crossed the playground with my eyes trained on that great big old tree, just waiting to be conquered on the far side of that open field. Well, my friends David and Tommy saw me and hurried to catch up. Emma, Chloe, and Penny were curious and wanting to know what was going on and ran, well, sorta, to join them. I stood at the base of that big old tree and David bent over and locked his hands together to give me a leg up. I just waved him off. In between two big roots that laid on top of the ground was a cement block that gave me just enough height to pull myself up to the bottom branch, and I began to climb that massive trunk. I climbed higher and higher, my eyes scanning the dozens and dozens of initials carved by previous climbers from generations before me. The trunk got smaller and smaller the higher I climbed, and I had to carefully choose the tiny branches I trusted to carry me to the top. And finally, I saw a freshly carved set of initials J.H. Jimmy Hobart. I looked down at my friends on the ground who were staring up in wonder. And then I looked back up and mapped my trek to a higher altitude. And carefully I made my way up another 3 feet or so, and the treetop was swaying back and forth as I clung on for dear life. This was the spot. Nobody could possibly top this. I was there. Well, I took out my pocket knife and carefully opened it and began to carve my piece of history. D. Period. I carved my D. Period too close in the center and was forced to cut my W. Period on the outside, which is difficult for a lefty, but I knew I could do it. Hanging on with one arm, I began W. Now, you see, this is where my trouble started. Everybody knows that when you leave your initials on something, you must leave a period after each letter. Well, I leaned out a little more to the right and began that final task, to gouge out that period. Well, the knife slipped and I went off in the same direction and began to rip through those tiny branches, clawing and grasping at twigs as I fell past them at an alarming rate of speed, which was about to end in the blink of an eye. Below me was the first sizable branch I'd seen in a while, protruding from the trunk of that grand old tree, and I was approaching it feet first. Well, thinking quickly, I opened my legs to make sure it stopped me. It did. Oh, my momentum was such that I turned right over the side like the sweeping second hand of a clock and fell head first. I remember thinking, this is not going to be good. I saw another branch zooming closer as I tried to ignore the enormous pain in my crotch, and I braced myself for the worst and hit it with my shoulder and tore my shirt. And now I was on my back, falling downward and watching the top of the tree get farther and farther away. I smacked the next branch so hard with the back of my head my vision was blurry. I bounced off and thought, here we go again, when my foot got caught in a fork in the branch, and there I was, dangling by one foot. And I was still a good 25 feet above solid ground. I saw my friends still staring up, frozen by the scene. I thought perhaps I could summon all of my strength and pull myself up to the safety of the branch that secured my shoe. It was a loafer-style canvas shoe. You know, it was kind of like a tennis shoe that you didn't tie up. Now, you could buy them at S.S. Kresge's for about $3 a pair. Now, everybody in the house had them. $15 shoot all 5 kids. Well, as luck would have it, I pulled up, my foot slipped out, and down I continued to fall. At least I was falling face down so I could see what I was going to hit next. And I did. I hit it chest first and my face bounced against it and busted my lip wide open. My nose was bleeding from sliding across the bark on my way down and it stung like crazy and my eyes were watering so bad I could hardly see. But I did. I saw there was just one more branch to hit and then it would be over. Well, I took this time to reflect on my accomplishment. That marvelous entry of my being there at the top, my initials, forever to remain at the very top of that grand old tree that was beating the frail life out of me. Now, Emma Clow, David, and Penny all backed away from the tree. I took a tremendous hit from that last branch, and thank God it was almost over. Almost. Between me and total victory lay that gray cement block. And that's when I found out that no matter how hard you try, humans cannot change direction in midair like a cat. I hit that cement block hard. I heard a collective, ooh. Then they rushed over to see if I was alive. They rolled my bloody, battered body over and tried to help me to my feet. With grass, blood, and dirt in my teeth, I smiled. A wide smile of utter satisfaction. The school bell rang and I limped toward the schoolyard with one shoe, a torn shirt, a busted lip, bloody nose, and my name in the Pearly Elementary School Book of Legends for everyone to see and to be in awe of for my amazing and astounding accomplishment. Well, we went in the second grader's door and the mass of bodies parted like the Red Sea. Everyone was looking at me and wondered what I had done. Well, I proudly walked to the nurse's office, ushered by my friends, of course, and others that followed out of curiosity. The nurse took one look at me and called the principal to her office. She asked me to tell Mr. Weldy exactly what happened and why. Well, I wasn't sure he could relate to my reasoning, as he was a huge man that certainly wouldn't know what it meant to be the smallest kid in the second grade. But I told him in great detail, and he seemed to take it all in stride. I was sent back to my class with fresh Band-Aids and a pair of shoes from the Lost and Found, where there was great clamor when I rejoined them. Well, in spite of Miss Barnhart's admonishing looks, I was pretty well pleased with myself, knowing that what I had done had rippled through the hallways in every class in every grade on both floors of the school, and by now, even Jimmy Hobart knew. That afternoon, I was daydreaming through arithmetic when I thought I heard a chainsaw somewhere. I asked Miss Barnhart for permission to sharpen my pencil and glanced out the window on my way to the sharpener. I stopped dead in my tracks and horror overcame me as I saw that grand old tree crash to the ground. No! How could they do this to me? This was the one thing I did better than anyone, and they robbed me of my glory. Why me? I stared at my school books for the rest of the day and heard nothing but the painful whine of chainsaws and wood chippers through the open window. In my mind, I saw my initials ground to sawdust, blown into the wind, and stuck on the soles of the workmen's boots. The public address speaker crackled, and then I heard the school secretary ask Miss Barnhart to send me to the principal's office. Have a seat, Danny. I had to have the tree taken down. Oh, I hung my head. I know how important this was to you, but I was afraid that someday, sooner or later, someone was going to look at what you did as a real challenge. After all, that was quite an accomplishment. I raised my head back up with interest. Now, I took the liberty of having them bring me the part of that branch that bears your initials. I beamed with hopefulness. I can't give it to you, though. It's school property. He opened his desk drawer and laid a freshly cut 6-inch piece of the branch with my initials carved into it on top of his desk. He said, sometimes it's a hard job being the principal, and often enough I need a little inspiration to get me through the day. So from now on, whenever I think things are impossible, I'm going to hold this in my hand and think of D.W. and know that if he could conquer the highest climb and survive the greatest fall, then maybe, just maybe, I too can aspire to greatness and face whatever challenges come across my path. In my book, Danny Waterhouse, you will always be remembered as the winner that you truly are.